Okay, patronage or not to patronage, and to the farmers and ranchers out there, just bear with me a little bit here. We've got a lot of people that follow Breakfast with Bill that aren't really into farming and ranching. And when we're talking about patronage, hey, appreciate the background. That's our show cattle barn. That's over on that Sandbur Hills, what my wife calls it. It's the old Hamill place. Bud Hamill used to live there years ago. We tore the buildings down. Now we're rebuilding stuff. But oh well, I digress. Patronage, cooperatives. There's a lot of farmers that do business with a lot of farm businesses that are actually co-ops. And the co-ops are owned by the members who do business at the cooperative. When the cooperative is profitable, the cooperative can pay out what's called patronage. Well, patronage, you can do it in cash, you can do it in stock, you can do it in combinations of cash and stock. And so a lot of times, you as a farmer, you end up with, generally they pay you enough cash that you can pay your taxes and everything, and then the rest have a stock. Now, when you have stock in a cooperative, you quote unquote have ownership. Now that stock doesn't have any ability to appreciate in value any. It's just patronage stock, and I really shouldn't say it doesn't have the ability to appreciate in value. If you are fortunate enough to maybe have a co-op that ends up getting sold to somebody else, you could get maybe more than the face value of the stock. It's rare, but it has happened. It just happened in my neighborhood just a little bit ago. But this patronage stock, and it's kind of an odd bird to people that aren't in agriculture. It becomes how do I say it? Sometimes a difficult thing to manage. I'm on a grain elevator board. It's a bigger grain elevator cooperative now than what it used to be. We've grown, we've consolidated, we're joined up with another one. We now have 7 locations, and we have different neighborhoods. We got one neighborhood that really, really likes patronage to be paid out. They want to own stock in the co-op. They want to have patronage stock. And then we got another area of our co-op, and they're not so big on patronage. They just want to make sure that we got a better bid than everybody else. What I mean bid, grain bid. They want to make sure we're paying 1 to 2 cents a bushel for corn and 1 to 3 cents a bushel for soybeans better than everybody else. I could care less if you give me patronage. I just want you to bid more for my grain. Well, we got another area that really likes to have patronage stock handed out to it. They like to have ownership in the farming cooperative. So as a board, that causes, what do you do when you have a profitable year? And some years are a lot more profitable than others. If you don't have a profitable year, you don't have to worry about issuing patronage. But if you do have a profitable year, then it becomes up, well, how much are we going to send out in patronage? Are we going to send out in patronage? And then you have the added complexity of that once the farmers own the stock, the only way they get their money for the stock is that the co-op board votes to redeem some of that stock. Now, if you completely quit farming or you die, we pay your money back on your stock. So you get your stock out by either dying or completely exiting farming. The other way you get it is the co-op says we're going to issue either, and you don't have to do a whole year at one time. You can do a partial year. You can say we're going to do 1/4 or 1/3 or 1/2 of a year. Especially if it was a really, really profitable year and you issued a lot of stock, you may not be able to redeem it all in one chunk. So, as a co-op board, do you redeem old stock? Do you issue more patronage with stock? And when you issue that stock, it does give working capital to the co-op, but it is a liability in the future than the fact that the co-op has to pay that stock back to the farmers. So you have the cash outlay part, and then you have the potential down the road, however much stock you issued, you have to pay that out at some point in time. So it becomes there. And then let me throw another wrinkle in it. The government has this domestic production tax credit. And it's a tax credit given to businesses that do things domestically that has business activity, and it's a tax credit. Okay. Co-ops get these tax credits. Now, as a co-op, do you keep that tax credit and use it yourself and then issue patronage stock to your patrons, or do you pass that domestic production tax credit straight through to your people that did business with you? Because since you're a co-op, you can pass that domestic production tax credit through to the members that did the business. So, as you see now, you got three balls up in the air. You have, are we going to pay stock, and cash out? And how much, because they're going to be 40% cash and 60% stock, or is it going to be 50-50 or 70-30? I mean, you get into all kinds of scenarios there. And then you get into the question, are we going to redeem a year in the past? Then you have, we got this domestic production tax credit, and do you pay that or pass it through? Now, I can tell you, as a farmer, my personal opinion, I like to have a little bit of ownership in my co-ops, but I'm one of those guys, I want my co-op to have a competitive bid. I don't want to see us not bidding with the competition just so we can make money to pay out patronage. Then, you also, that domestic production tax credit, I love passing that through to farmers, because that comes right off your bottom line as farmers. If you get $10,000 worth of production credits, you get to take that off your gross, which if you're in the 30% tax bracket, by the time you throw Social Security, state income tax, and minimum federal income tax, you're in that, all of a sudden there's that's $3,000 tax free. That's the I'm not the smartest tack or sharpest tack in the drawer, but tax free is tax free. So, and the other thing is, I also don't like stock getting real old. I don't like owning patronage stock that's over 10 years old. And the thing about that is, too, I also believe is the patronage stock ought to be owned by the people that are currently doing business with the co-op, not somebody that hasn't done business for the last 20 years. And one way of doing that is you redeem the old stock. And since that old stock's already had the tax paid on it when it was issued, when you redeem the stock, that money is, once again, tax-free. So, that's kind of my opinion on it, and the reason I tell you that, I serve on a local grain elevator board like I was talking earlier, and we got to figure out exactly what you're going to do with it, and you got some members that are saying, well, by God, if you don't issue any patronage stock, I'm not doing any more business with you. And then again, we got other members that, I don't care if you issue any patronage stock, I just wish you'd pay 1 or 2 or 3 cents more a bushel. And then you got more that think like you on the co-op. And I'm not sure, not everybody agrees with me. Let me tell you, not everybody agrees with me on the co-op board. But it becomes a real balancing act. Because I can tell you, if you give me 70% stock and 30% cash, the cash is pretty much going to go to pay the tax on the stock. If you give me 40% cash, 60% stock, I'm not getting a whole lot of cash free. 50-50 is even better, and I'm somebody that likes to, if I pay out 50-50. But I also know some of the newer co-ops that have been formed up, they're never going to issue any stock. If they pay any patronage, it's all going to be cash. Just going to be straight out cash, going to be done. But that means the co-op members never have any ownership in the elevator. And I understand why they're doing that. They're doing that now because when you vote, if you co-ops, I tell you what, I really don't see that in our neighborhood, that we dock more than private or terminal elevators. I think we've been about as fair. Okay, does consolidation co-op purchased by the effective? Yes, because when you go into a consolidation or something gets purchased, it has to be approved by the stockholders, including the patronage stockholders. And one of the reasons that some of these newer formed co-ops don't put out any stock patronage is they're worried about 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 guys that are big farmers that do a lot of business with the co-op, basically end up controlling all the patronage stock. And then it depends on what they want to do, not what everybody else wants to do, as to what happens. So if they just go to a straight cash payout, then basically the co-op board themselves will have the ability to do what they want to with the co-op. A lot of times sometimes there's a what I call a membership stock that's issued. So everybody that ever does business gets one share of stock, a membership stock, and that's sometimes a certain class. Also, a lot of co-ops in Illinois, we're basically what's legislated as an open co-op, which means if somebody wants to drive their truck on the scales and sell us grain, we have to take it. We cannot refuse business to anybody, which means then anybody can be a stockholder, a shareholder in the co-op. So it gets real complicated. It gets real tough. And I know this is not all the stuff going on in France, all the stuff else going on in the world. This isn't a real flashy topic. But I can tell you, for the farmers and ranchers out there that do big business with co-ops, this is an issue. This is a financial issue to the farmers and the ranchers, and how your co-op board thinks and acts and does things. It's going to affect your bottom line. And so I can just tell you where I'm at, and you may disagree with me. If the co-op's in a position to, I love them passing that pass-through. That domestic production tax credit pass-through is worth a lot of times more money than the co-op down the road that's keeping that and giving you a little stock patronage. Well, you pass it through, and my wife goes, what's the pass-through? Instead of us using that tax credit, because we're a co-op, we're able to pass it through on the basis of how much business you did with the co-op, straight to our co-op members that did business with us that year. So that domestic production tax credit is a big deal on a co-op. Now, whether a new president keeps that on with a new Congress and House, or Senate and House, whether that tax credit continues, I don't know. But for right now, it's out there and it's available, and it's big dollars to farmers if the co-op passes it through. Then I also like getting rid of old stock. You run into the difficulty, and also too, if you are a co-op and you have members that are out of your state, at least I know the state of Illinois, and I think this is with all the states. If you have a vote, you have to redeem, before you have the vote, all the out-of-state stock, which can get expensive. And you say, what do you mean out-of-state stock? I thought it was local farmers. There's a lot of landowners that may live in North Carolina or Colorado or California or Iowa or Texas. That's where some of my landlords live. I mean, they were born and raised here. They ended up moving someplace else to work or whatever. Their parents died. They inherited the farm. They want to keep the home farm. It's the old home farm. We got attachment to the old home farm, but yet they live out of state. Well, you buy all of their stock before you have a vote as a co-op, because if you don't, then you got to go through the Security and Exchange Commission out in New York City, because you have a nationwide stock vote then. So by keeping the stock closely paid up and not letting it get 20, 25, 30, 40 years old, redeem that old stock, it just makes life easier for you. And like I said, I also like to have the people that are doing business with the co-op, the ones running the co-op. And if you got somebody that's got 20 and 30-year-old stock, some of those people are no longer doing business with you. And so why do you want them to have a voice in what your co-op's doing? So I like keeping the stock within a 10-year time frame. Now, that maybe doesn't mean 10 calendar years. That means 10 years of issued stock. Because every co-op, if you have a year or two that you're not profitable or not very profitable, you will come out there and maybe not issue stock that year. So maybe you got 10 years of stock in the last 16 years, let's say, or the last, you got 10 years of stock in the last 14 or 10 years of stocks in the last 12. As long as your 10 stock paid out years within your current fiscal year, my guideline, and that's just how I think, you're in pretty good shape. Don't let that stock get old. Pay it off. And plus that puts tax-free dollars in the farmer's pocket. Tax-free. So I like that domestic production pass-through tax credit going to the co-op members. And I like keeping the stock paid up reasonably well, and then whatever's left over, if you have a really profitable year, let's pay out some patronage. Let's put some ownership out there. Let's put some stock out there and some cash. And so just when you go to your local co-op meeting and you're like, doggone it, we didn't get any patronage again. Did you get the domestic production pass through, or did they keep it? Because I can tell you in a lot of cases that tax credit pass through is worth more money than a patronage payout. Then, how old's the oldest stock? That's a legitimate question, I think, that ought to be asked at every co-op board meeting. How old's the oldest stock? You know, are you guys current on keeping that stock within a 10-year rotation? And that 10-year rotation is something that's really kind of encouraged, too, by a lot of people that are, quote-unquote, the experts in co-ops. You know, you have somebody come in and talk to your co-op board on some of the things you should do and what you should do, and every one of them will mention keeping that stock within that 10-year time frame. Don't let that liability build into a $800,000 monster out there for a smaller co-op, or a $2 million monster for a larger, you know, intermediate-sized co-op. Because then you're like, well, we voted to redeem 1956 stock this year. There's not much of it left because just about everybody died off that's got stock from 56. I mean, that goes on. That goes on out there. And then, too, when that co-op wants to consolidate up with somebody, that becomes a big liability that sometimes lessens your options as a co-op on what you can do, because you got to find somebody that's got deep enough pockets to buy a lot of that stock back, Jeremy. And don't get me wrong, there's some co-ops that they're struggling to stay afloat and keep going, and they don't have those options. So don't crawl all over your board members too hard on that. It's just I like that domestic tax credit production, that domestic production tax credit passed through to members. I like getting rid of the old stock, and then I like issuing new patronage stock. So that's Breakfast with Bill this morning.